Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security. The Cognitive Crucible is a forum that presents different perspectives and emerging thought leadership related to the information environment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of or endorsement by the Information Professionals Association.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is the Honorable Ellen McCarthy, who is a national security professional with extensive experience in government and the private sector. She has held several high-level positions in the U.S. intelligence community, including Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research from 2018 to 2020. She is the founder and CEO of the Trust in Media Cooperative, or TIM. Ellen McCarthy, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you, John. It is so good to be here. Thank you for the invite.
You bet. And the conversation I'd like to have with you today, Ellen, will be a Gallup across your national security experience. Talk about why you founded the Trust in Media Cooperative and what interested listeners might do to help if they are so inclined. But before we get into these topics, could we start by getting your assessment of our strategic landscape, or if you prefer, the times in which we live?
That's a whopper of a question. We could spend the whole hour talking about that. I mean, there's so many aspects, from our military and defense posture to sort of geopolitical politics. There's just so many factors that impact sort of where we sit as a nation strategically. John, though, just to save some time and to put some focus on what I think our number one factor is, it really gets to polarization and domestic extremism. And I just think that is the one factor that is so incredibly important, because our national cohesion and our ability to respond to external threats is really what enables all those other factors. So if you're worried about war with China or Russia, or how do we respond in this international environment with our our need to maintain our alliances and friendships, the ability to be on the same sheet of music, the ability to be working together towards similar goals is just so incredibly important. And so I really put this one at the top of the list. And plus, because we're a target. I mean, the reality is that almost our secret sauce, our transparency, our open media ecosystem, our free speech, our constitutional liberties, that's what makes us who we are. That's our great strength. And yet it also makes us just the biggest target, because there's other countries and entities that want to take advantage of that. And so every day we're being targeted by countries who want to poison our ecosystem, really affect how we work together as a nation. And they're winning, and that's something that really, really concerns me. I use the analogy that I feel like we're dying this death, this polarization, and this sort of this division in our national unity is dying by a million mosquito bites. That every day we're seeing something about how Russia or China or Iran or teenagers in Ireland are taking advantage of us by poisoning our ecosystem, and it's just causing us, not necessarily to change our opinion on things, but causing us to have less trust in the institutions that keep us together, that make us a democracy. It's funny, I'm not a huge fan of polls. I am a huge fan of Gallup. And so I've worked with them quite closely. I think they're just a great organization. They have spent years really looking at how Americans view our institutions of democracy. And so every year I can't wait for them to report on sort of where we are. And every year our trust in institutions of democracy, like the police, the military, the government, religion, science, every year it declines. And there's a direct connection to sort of our information ecosystem. Instead of changing our position on things, we just don't trust them anymore. And it's actually interesting. And the last report I read actually was in 2023. And again, our trust in institutions of democracy continues to decline, with one exception. And that remains small business. It's interesting. We don't trust the military. We don't trust the government, but we do have this trust in small business. And I
Is
think
that
maybe
right?
there's something there, so we do trust organizations where we have connections and relationships and oversight. Maybe the solution to this problem of this absence of information quality lies in the things that we do trust, which tends to be local, small, and in areas where we have relationships.
Wow. So many potential follow-ups. I don't want to, get us down into a rabbit hole on what you were just saying. But first of all, to our audience, we're recording this on the 5th of September, 2024. So people have a point in time marker there. The military. Okay. Do you think, Ellen, you could send to me a link so we can include it in the show notes to that most recent Gallup survey or poll that you were just saying? I think that would, yeah,
happy to do that. In
yeah.
fact,
I think that would be interesting for some folks to check out, and also you said that the military is slipping in its trust scores. I always thought that the
every year.
military was right there towards the top of institutions that were like maintaining a decent trust with
So
society.
the military is the slowest in decline, but it does continue to decline.
I
So
see. I see.
yes,
I see.
but no, it every year we're seeing this slow degradation in trust in the military, but again, in the police force, in religious organizations, and and the biggest decline is in media.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can kind of understand that with the way things have been for sure. You mentioned death by 1,000 mosquito bites or maybe 1,000,000 mosquito bites. And
Billions.
but before we started recording, you shared with me something that was in the news this week with RT. Would that be like? Would you
Yeah, I mean
consider?
I think that's an incredible example because it's certainly
Yeah.
the most current.
Do you
Where
think you could give a recap for that for those
just a brief synopsis
yeah.
is just this week, I think it was maybe Monday or Tuesday, Department of Justice came out with sanctions and fines against individuals at Russia Today. And it was related to some efforts that, and while Russia Today is denying it, it really gets to efforts that they are engaging in to continue to poison our media ecosystem. So I think there was 10 individuals that were sanctioned, to include the lead for Russia Today. One specific example was they found that an organization in Tennessee was paid $10 million by RT to actually produce and disseminate information that really presents Russia in a much more positive light. But in addition, I mean, I would recommend that you go look what's going on. There's websites that are being created. This is typical sort of Russian tradecraft in terms of creating fake news sites that are pushing around synthetic data, again, that look and feel very real. And especially at the local. So I talk about the importance of local. So their focus really is on local news sites, local media sites that look and feel so real, but are not. They really are. And so Justice is incredibly engaged on this right now, have sanctioned those folks. And, they actually highlighted in the indictments that, it really is about individuals whose whole goal is to diminish trust in our institutions of democracy. So again, it gets to, it's not necessarily the impact these articles or this data is having on our opinions, but it's more about the impact it's having in our overall trust in and all those things that make us, school system, science, the military. And that's my area of concern.
Right. Yeah. I just found the Department of Justice news via press release on it. 2 Russia Today RT employees indicted for covertly funding and directing a U.S. company that published thousands of videos in furtherance of Russian interests. Yeah, so we'll have a link to that in the show notes. So there is one of the 1,000,000 mosquito
One of
bites.
them.
right there.
And we should care, John. I mean, this is something that should make us mad. You know, I don't want to be a victim, a lemming of Russia right now, or China, and yet that's what's happening.
Right. And the surface area, the attack surface area is vast and just mind-boggling. So also in the news this week, and yeah, this is not a political podcast, so I don't know if this, what the extent of all of this is, but also just this week there was in the news reports of Chinese infiltration into the New York State government at the highest levels.
Right.
So I mean, there's it's the attack surface area is vast, and
yeah, and it's so on the China piece, what's so concerning about that is that if you look over certainly the last couple of election cycles, because that's where sort of my focus has been recently, although this is a bigger issue than just on elections, but that seems to be an easy target right now. China always played a much more sort of benign, passive role. What we're seeing right now is that they're not being passive at all. In the past, it was they didn't want any sort of mis and disinformation efforts to be attributed to China. Now they're being much more forward leaning and much more sort of out there than they've ever been before, and that is an area of concern. The other point I want to make is when I highlight lemmings, I don't mean to in any way diminish sort of the American people's ability to discern what's real and what's not real. It's not a case of that we're just these sitting ducks who don't understand what's going on. The reality is that I actually think in the last few years, awareness, and again, data showed us, awareness on this issue has gotten so much better through education programs and tools. Like there's a lot going on in this space, and people do understand, that we are a target. The challenge is that it's just getting so much better. The adversary is just getting better. The tools are getting better. The technology is getting better. And it's going to continue to move in that direction. And again, this recent RT issue, this focus on local news, local media sites, is concerning, given that data point I shared with Gallup, which is the one thing we seem to continue to trust is local business. And so it seems to be very targeted and hitting us where we are strongest right now, and trying to weaken us there.
Yeah. So given your extensive national security background, how do you see the erosion of trust in information impacting national security, decision making, and potentially even global stability? And perhaps, Ellen, maybe you could just take 30 seconds at the beginning to give a more complete background of what you've done, so that our audience can be a little bit more familiar with your experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is another huge question. I mean, erosion of trust really is I think our number one national security issue. It hampers effective communication, crisis management, and it makes us, and we've talked about this already, the public, just much more vulnerable to manipulation. The example I want to highlight really gets to sort of where I've grown up. And I've served in and around the U.S. intelligence community for over 30 years. So I started as an all-source intelligence analyst at the Office of Naval Intelligence, working on Soviet submarine operations. But of course, over my career, I would support the Coast Guard in the war on drugs, certainly would work the war on terrorism as an all-source analyst, would run operations at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, helped with intelligence policy at the Pentagon and the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And my career would be capped at the Bureau of Intelligence Research at the State Department, where I supported Secretary of State Pompeo. I mean, I have to say, and then I also spent some time in the private sector, running a company that builds tools that would help with cyber threat intelligence efforts. I ran a nonprofit called the Intelligence and National Security Alliance, INSA, which really is a platform for the private sector and government to come together to look at some problems that the community, the national security sector is facing. this walk down memory lane is only to highlight that, the world has changed. With the digital age, things have changed. And, when I started at O&I as a submarine analyst, in some ways, the intelligence community was the only game in town. We had the best sources of data. We had this ability to bring that data together and provide insights that, for the most part, our customers, in this case, Navy submarine commanders, they trusted. Because we were the only game in town. Plus, they trusted us. We were very highly integrated. We had these relationships. We worked together. I think over the last 30 years, things have changed. It's much more difficult for the intelligence community now to have the impact that it had in the past. And I'm an intel officer, a fan of the intelligence community. I would go back in a second. But our challenge is in the digital age that if policymakers or warfighters or law enforcement officials don't like what the intelligence community is providing them, they have so many other resources to go to get the information that they do like. And everybody's a victim of cognitive bias and silos, and I always say, as I've taught classes, that the world of intelligence and the world of policymaking have always been a little bit at odds. Policymakers see the world the way they want to see it. Intelligence sees the world the way it is. And so now with this increased absence of trust, it makes it even harder for the intelligence community to do its job, to share insights that actually are embraced and used. And that's not to say that they don't. There's great successes in that world, but it's just harder because if the policymaker doesn't like or trust what they're getting from the IC, they can always go outside. And that's my concern, is that we have this sort of natural competition with the private sector right now that has all this data, all these tools, all these capabilities that are very valuable, but also can make it difficult for the IC, who still does things based on analytic tradecraft and validating of sources. We really hold true this concept of providing information that has been vetted and resourced and really is our best estimate of what's going on. If there's no trust, then the IC is having a challenge getting its voice heard. And I definitely saw that when I was towards the end of my career, and I don't think it's going to get any better. So, my real concern is when the intelligence community is now facing challenges, getting its word across, providing value to decision makers. That is a concern for me because we really do, we really do things in a way that provides assessments that are and should be considered. So.
Right.
A very long answer, John. I'm sorry.
No. This topic doesn't lend itself to like soundbite answers for sure. Maybe we could talk a little bit about AI and how AI fits into this whole problem space. Do you think you could take a beat on that and just talk about?
We're serious. This is AI is. It's so funny. We talk about, I referenced my time in the intelligence community, and I have to tell you, my whole life, I've been waiting for AI. I've been told when I started back in the, late 80s, early 90s, I was told about these tools that were going to come in and help analysts, save time by pulling together information that, would take time for an analyst to do, but now there would be systems in place that would help us bring together data, collate insights so that we could spend our time now on truly what is unique. In other words, we're waiting for AI, and now that AI is here, we're afraid of it because, of course, while AI can be a force for incredible good, and I am a fan of AI, it can also be used for bad. And that tends to be where our media puts focus right now, is on, how AI can be used to push narratives that are, not consistent with reality, how it can be weaponized, how it can be used to influence how we view the world. And I'm not diminishing the importance of that, but but I do think it's also tools that can help us fight that. And so, it's not just one side or the other. We just have to understand it.
Yeah.
I think the area where we're seeing the most concern, the most discussion is how AI is being used in elections. Right now, more than half the world is voting, is going to some form. It's not just the United States. I don't think there's ever been a time when, the world is voting and in national elections. And so, of course, there's been real concern, valid concern about how AI will impact those elections, the outcome of those elections. And it's interesting. I think what we're seeing so far as we review the data is that AI and synthetic generated content is not necessarily impacting people's opinions. We're not seeing during the midterm elections in the US, while there was robocalls and fake images and fake news, I put in parentheses. We're not seeing that it necessarily influenced the way people vote or what they think. But it gets back to what we talked about earlier, which is, but it is having an impact on how we view sort of our institutions' democracy broadly, but more specifically, how we view how each state and local entity is running their election. And, what's really interesting is the Bipartisan Policy Center just put out a study last year. It's an incredible study that really reviewed how Americans view their own elections. And, on a positive note, what's really great is, for the most part, people trust the election processes and operations in their own state or local community. They do believe that in their own state, for the most part, their vote will count and it will be fair. Where there's concern is how the other 49 states do it, because right now every state does it a little differently. The mail-in process is different, or everybody does it a little differently. And especially after COVID, there was a lot of things that were changed to accommodate the voting during a pandemic. And so there's even less understood about how other states are doing it. Every state does it differently. And so my concern is if you believe that your state is doing it right, but another state is doing it wrong, what's going to happen at the end of all of this, And again,
right.
That's putting on media organizations and state the task of really being transparent and really communicating how they do it, and really pulling together resources that help people understand that while my state does it this way, Maryland does it this way. So we gain this understanding. Right. But it also makes us an incredible target. And again, getting back to that RT example, my concern is that Russia and China now going to put more focus on mis and disinformation related to how elections are run, to cause us to have some concern about what's going on in other states. And so I think that is a very real issue, a very real vulnerability in an area where I think we need to put a lot of focus right now, as we're, within 2 months of the next election.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a good entree into TIM, the organization that you founded. So maybe you could talk a little bit about TIM and your charter and TIM's plans for navigating this big, huge problem space.
Yeah, so Trusted Media was launched a couple of years ago. We're a 501c3, and our focus really is on improving the reliability, the security, and the accessibility of quality information. We believe, and we're an organization of roughly 2,000 members and companies and nonprofits. We think that perhaps another strategy is to have this sort of cohesive focus on what is quality information. It's not just about moderating content or fact checking or fighting what is bad, but it really is putting more focus on what is quality. I liken it to the food sector where, we've created organic food. Certainly in my lifetime, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as organic food, or at least I didn't know about it. I grew up on Wonder Bread. But my kids have never had Wonder Bread because now we have a much broader understanding of what clean eating, what the benefits are of of organic food, but we still have choices. You can pay for organic food, or there are those who completely disregard that and they eat junk food every day, and that's fine. And so can we provide sort of the same options in the information ecosystem? And so can we provide almost the organic food in the food ecosystem to the information ecosystem? Can we create demand, not create, but can we provide for the production, dissemination, and consumption of that which everyone agrees meets quality standards? I mentioned that we're roughly 2,000 folks right now, and we come from media, academia, technology, corporate America, because this really, in our estimation, requires a cohesive approach. It's not a one-fix-all solution. We've already seen this, that there's not one tool that's going to identify deep fakes. There's not one education program that's going to fix this. It requires a cohesive approach. And it really gets to empowering individuals to be a part of this as well. That it really, at the end of the day, we're capitalists. I believe that we should be taking a book from the pages of social media and other media organizations who have derived great benefit from, marketing and pushing mis and disinformation. Can we do the same thing? Can we create this economic benefit for the production and consumption of quality information?
Yeah,
and so that's what this group is about.
Yeah.
We have 3 initiatives right now that we're engaged in. First is just to continue, and I thank you for this opportunity to talk a little more about what we're doing, because it's really about, establishing partnerships and creating connections. I'm very proud to say that, we work very closely with the Information Professionals Association. We're actually hosting a symposium at the end of October. But then it's also to we really need to define what is information quality. I didn't know what organic food was, but now can we gain a definition of information quality that is actually broadly understood, broadly accepted, because it's done very openly. When I say accepted, it's accepted by media organizations and technologies and education programs and research organizations. Can we sort of make information quality almost a thing? And not only what is information quality, but what are the standards and the characteristics and the classifiers of information quality that, again, are being used? What is the common language? What are the things that actually make quality information? It's not about opinion. It's not about what you think, because this is about taking the politics out of all of this. What are the ingredients of quality information? And there's lots of groups that are doing research on this right now. Can we bring them together, normalize those standards, and gain some understanding and awareness for those things? And when I say standards, it's things like provenance of data, timeliness of data, credibility, sentiment neutrality. They're not very sexy terms, but they are the ingredients of what is quality information. Can these ingredients be based on research and science, not just opinion? Can they be open and transparent? And then can they be measurable, and can we test them? And so that's something we're very focused on right now. And then, of course, our third initiative is to create a comprehensive resource library. We're pulling together all the research, all the activities that are going on in the information quality space, making it open and accessible to everyone, almost a GitHub for quality information, except it includes not just software, but education programs and research. And then also create an innovation lab where we can sort of test hypotheses and test technologies and test curricula to see how they're doing. And that, at the end of the day, is the things that Tim is all about. Narrowing down to elections, because that's where we started. This is a big goal. This is creating the organic food industry for information is kind of a big goal. So can we narrow it down to start? It's where are we going to put our focus initially? And we decided this year that really putting some effort towards this definition and testing standards and really proving a hypothesis that if people can index their information, if they're empowered and enabled to actually understand what the ingredients are in their information, that they will that they'll use that they'll veer towards it. And so we've developed we're in the process of developing a proof of concept right now that really gets to that hypothesis that people will veer towards quality information if given the resource to do that, by building an AI-enabled dashboard that we're hoping to launch. Actually, we're going to do a soft launch in September, a hard launch in October, with a focus on election operations. And we picked elections because of course, it's a huge topic right now. It's one that everybody cares about, regardless of sort of what your ideology is, what your political persuasion. And, it's one that's going to draw some interest. And so this dashboard is really focused on data that is related to election. And when I say election operations, it's polling locations, procedures, how, it gets to how each state is running their election. And then and the data is going to be indexed by these characteristics that we've done some research on, and it'll enable people to index their data by these characteristics. There'll be tabs. In fact, the dashboard has been modeled off of the COVID-19 dashboard that Johns Hopkins produced during the pandemic. And so it really just gives people, voters, media organizations, election officials, whoever is interested, the opportunity to just sort of see what's going on right now. And, we hope to prove this point that if people have some resource like this, that their eyes will veer towards data that meets these standards, as opposed to data that maybe doesn't meet those standards. So it's a baby step towards identifying that there is demand for quality information.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Wow. Well, that is an ambitious agenda for sure. And you mentioned during the course of that that there is a symposium that's coming up. It's October 28th in the National Capital Region of the United States. There'll be a link in the show notes for people to find out more information about how you can attend, for organizations, if interested, how you can potentially support the symposium and help sponsor it. But presumably, Ellen, attendees at the conference will learn a lot more about all of these initiatives, how they can help, while simultaneously just getting some really good discussion and networking on this entire problem space.
Yeah, John, I'm very excited about this. While our dashboard is a proof of concept, there's this much bigger goal. There are so many sectors, so many people that rely on quality information to make decisions. And so that's really what this symposium is about. It's called Beyond the Noise, Elevating Information Quality in an Era of Generative AI. We're doing it in partnership with the Information Professionals Association. In terms of the kinds of topics that we're going to be focusing on, it is, what is information quality? Why is it important? We're bringing in speakers and panelists to then talk about how information quality is being leveraged in different areas of media, academia, corporate America, with a special focus on other sort of policy areas like incident response. How is the incident response community doing its job in terms of communicating to the public, natural disasters, in an era of generative AI? How are they sort of navigating those challenges? How is the finance sector, doing its job of, informing corporate America on where to make investments, business decisions in this era of generative AI? How is the science community, how is the health community doing its job in terms of informing the public on things that may be going down in an era where we don't trust the science or our public health community? So, it really, and we're looking at attendees from all these different places. I'm really excited about this is our first sort of launch in this, and I hope to make it an annual thing with IPA. But I'll tell you, we're getting a great response to this. For the most part, people really do want to participate and do want to play. So Very excited. Oh, we're also going to have AI companies coming in and talking about what they're doing to promote information quality. So I really would encourage you, if you have the time, to participate and have the interest, and I know that your listeners do. So.
Yep. And again, link in the show notes to find out more information about this on October 28th. So, looking ahead, what do you think some of the more promising technological or educational treatments or bright spots that you're becoming aware of that could potentially be part of the solution set for these challenges that you've been describing?
I'll tell you, I mentioned a bit ago that, while we're looking at how AI can be a source of bad, I mean, I'm really excited at how AI can also be a source for good. And it's very interesting in our own little proof of concept, this LLM-based dashboard. We're really seeing that as we run data through existing AI capabilities like ChatGPT, that it's actually pretty good. I mean, we hear a lot about what's bad with some of these capabilities, but what we're seeing is that in terms of a resource to identify what is quality information, they're actually pretty good. And we'll certainly talk more about that as a symposium, and we're just starting to learn more about this. But that's very exciting to see that these resources can be used to actually highlight what is quality information. But as I mentioned, there's so much activity going on in this space in terms of academic research and education programs, and research on technologies that can highlight deep fakes, on fact checking and content moderation. There's tons of good work going on in this space. My concern is that it's not really coordinated. I think that we should start treating information and data like a critical infrastructure. And, every effort that we've taken, certainly on the government side, to do that, of course, has been fraught with issues, as people are worried about government sort of dabbling in our constitutional rights and free speech, and the government's becoming the truth police. So I think that this actually has to start as a private sector level. Can we create almost an ISAC? Like we have for
I was
going to say, so an ISAC is an Information Security Analysis Center. So in our country, we have 18 critical infrastructures, food and water and electricity and nuclear, the things that are required to keep our country going, literally. And they are overseen by these public-private entities called ISACs, Information Security Analysis Centers, that share data, share information, provide analysis, provide warning. Can we create a similar thing for the information data space? Can we bring together all these incredibly good efforts that are doing incredibly good work and potentially serve in a coordinating role to ensure that that we're all working together? It's interesting, if you look at the history of the ISACs, the one that I find most interesting and most applicable here is the North American Electric Regulatory Commission, the NERC. And it is a cooperative of all the electric companies, or most of the electric companies in the United States. And they started as a privately self-organized body because they found that there was some economic benefit to electric companies working together on standards, overseeing operations, researching and diving in whenever there was blackouts, so disaster response. And this was completely privately run. And there was an economic benefit to working together, that if everybody has the same level of voltage, the same number of prongs in their outlets, that everybody does better. Can we find the same thing in the information sector? And so that's where I see, can we better coordinate all these really good things that are going on with AI and education programs and public awareness? Can we coordinate them and bring them all together?
Yeah. And as you're speaking there, Ellen, I looked it up. There's a nonprofit, it looks like, the the National Council of ISACs, member-driven organizations for the purpose of what you were just describing. Yeah, link in the show notes for anyone that wants to check that out a little bit more. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, one of your mentions there was about what I heard you were saying, at least, was like standardization of some of these things, like just like NIST, right?
Right.
The National Institute for Standards and Technologies. Yeah, but
Right.
there is something uh, well, infrastructure and having some commonality of technological standards and the way we just communicate and do business in general is one of those invisible or mostly invisible, but extremely helpful components of culture and society. There's this great quote, but and I'm not going to get it quite right, but I'll put it in the show notes. I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but by this fellow, he was an late 1800s, early 1900s philosopher. His name was Alfred North Whitehead, and he was actually the dissertation advisor for Bertrand Russell. So he was like no slouch in the academic world, although a lot of people might not have heard of him in our audience. But anyway, he has this great little quote which goes something like, civilization advances according to the number of things which can be performed without thinking about them. And so as technology gets more and more integrated into just the background of our daily life, so does our ability to pursue goals, right? And so not too many people in America, at least, not too many people are concerned about where their next meal is coming from. Getting food into your body is less of a problem today than it has ever been. Ever. Now, okay, you can argue, okay, is it quality food? Yes, all that. But the point is, where the next calorie is coming from is not something that I'm not thinking about wrapping up this discussion with you right now because I've got to go out there and forage for nuts, right?
Right.
All of that is built into my daily life, right? So is the supply of electricity. So is making sure that the refrigerator is working. All this stuff, right, is just like stuff that is just assumed to be working correctly. And so what you were just describing with respect to information management, information consumption, information quality, we need to get there with that too. And we're not there yet.
And I think the secret is, so the problem with content moderation and fact checking, although I do think there has to be some level of that, it's putting power in people to sort of make their own decisions. So again, I use the analogy, I love the food analogy, because yes, we can get to food. But there are days that I choose to have a Big Mac, because I love Big Macs, knowing full well that and that Diet Coke are probably not the best for me, but I make that choice. Or I can decide to have my chicken that's grilled with broccoli. And I can make that choice too. And I get to make that choice. And that's the vision for the future. So, I'm not suggesting that, those are sources of information that should just go away, because they're not going to go away. They shouldn't go away. They serve their purpose. They serve their consumer base. But for those who care, for those who want to understand, what's really going on and can trust that source, that should be a resource as well. So I should be able to go to the organic information site as well.
Yeah. Well, this has been dynamite, Ellen. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts and what you and your colleagues are actively doing in order to foment positive solutions to this problem. So if we could maybe wrap up, do you have any thoughts on what an interested student might examine, which would help, advance what we know about this problem space?
Yeah, in terms of, what I really care about looking into the future, it is, and I've talked about this with a lot of people who are much smarter than me. In fact, this question came up in a coffee with a dear friend and colleague who is much smarter than me. But is we live in, you use the food analogy, you're not going to have to forage for nuts, but you also live in a world right now where you have access to more data, more information, more insights than you've ever had before. Especially with AI, the amount of synthetic data that's being sort of added to our ecosystem is just crazy. So we have access to all this incredible information. And yet we're already seeing that people just aren't doing it. They're overwhelmed. They're only going to information sites that sort of feed the narrative in their head, or they just don't care. And so, and as a result of that, we are living in this world right now, which is more polarized than it's ever been before, less trustful than it's ever been before. And I think that's our biggest weakness right now. How do we engage in, partnerships with other countries? How do we respond to crises and natural events if we don't trust the institutions that are empowered to actually help us with that? And that is the thing that keeps me awake at night. So we have all the tools, we have all the resources, but we just don't seem to care. So what is it? What is it? How do we make people care? What is it? If we don't take the time, or we're not, and by the way, it's not just time, it's money. In order to get to some of these quality information sites, you have to pay subscriptions. I pay a lot of money every month and a lot of time, going down rabbit holes on things that matter to me. What is it going to take to sort of raise awareness, enhance demand, and enhance this desire for quality information? What are the factors? I want a better understanding of the factors that impact consumption of information. It's not just facts and quality. It gets to those other things like the desire to belong, just these basic human things that also information supports. And I want to have a better understanding of that so we can leverage those insights towards production, consumption of quality information.
Yeah. Good thought for sure. Finally, what's a good book or maybe an online resource? We've got links to the resources that you've mentioned, but is there a book that is aimed at this problem space that you're aware of, or it could just be something good that's on your bedside table right now?
So I've got to say, this whole trust in media effort started. I have to say that it was actually, I was listening to former Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, a few years ago, talk about this study that Rand had put out called Truth Decay, and it's the diminishing role of facts in American decision-making. It was written by then the head of Rand, Michael Rich, and Jennifer Kavanaugh, who's now at the Carnegie Institute Endowment. And I read that book, and it really was the book that sort of, it became my Bible. I mean, trust in media really came from that. Of course, I've read a number of things since then, but I would say that if you haven't read Countering Truth Decay, I would highly recommend it, because it really highlights that, this solution is really going to be a cohesive approach where all these different organizations from these different sort of lines of business come to work together. And so it offers areas for more research. It offers some solutions. It is my Bible, so highly recommend it.
Yeah. And okay, dynamite suggestion. And for interested listeners, we actually had an episode with one of the authors of their corpus on Truth Decay. I think it's not just like a single thing. There's a number of different pieces on Truth Decay, but one of them was with Katherine Carman. And so we will put a link in the show notes to her episode from a year and a half ago or so, maybe something along those lines. So yeah, definitely a great suggestion for sure. Everyone, please check out the symposium that will be on October 28th. And with that, Ellen McCarthy, thank you so much for being a guest on the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you, John Bicknell. This was great.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.